Hello and welcome. What the fuck? We'll just restart that. Blip, 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 blip. Here we go. Hello and welcome to Three's a Crime, a true crime podcast. I'm Tori.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Lindsey.
And that's our intro.
Here we are professional podcasters.
We're podcasters, bitches. Warning. This episode contains explicit language and graphic descriptions of murder and crime scenes. Listener discretion is advised. Hi!
Hi, everybody.
It's 3AC. Remember our very first episode? 3AC.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about Abraham Shakespeare and DeeDee Moore.
What a fucking name.
Both of them, you know? So this story,
Jesus.
so my brother and sister-in-law were just in Spokane recently, and my sister-in-law is a prosecutor in Florida. And so she actually told me about this case and sent me some of the info. So thank you, Bonnie.
Hi, bye.
Hi, Bonnie.
So Abraham Shakespeare was born April 24th, 1966 in Lakeland, Florida. I wasn't actually able to find out a whole lot about his childhood other than that his father was a citrus picker. He grew up in Lake Wales. He spent at least part of his childhood in homes for juvenile delinquents, and he dropped out of school in the 7th grade. So as an adult, he could just barely read and write and was working as a laborer making $8 an hour. He didn't have a car. He didn't have a driver's license. He was
Dang, he was on a wild
yeah, he just,
frontier, I guess.
yeah. I don't think he would have been described as an upstanding citizen. Though we are going to discuss later that he was a very generous individual. But he had a long criminal record. But it was mostly for things like driving without a license. Or not paying child support. I mean, there was a little theft in there and whatnot, but do you know what I mean? These weren't crazy violent crimes.
Things.
He did go to jail twice. And then after being released from the second time in 1995, he went to live with his mother.
Oh, we're in the 90s.
We're in the 90s. So this is going to stretch from the 90s into the 2000s. So on November 15th, 1996, Abraham was working as a day laborer, riding shotgun with a truck driver named Michael Ford on an overnight trip to Miami. On their way, they stopped at a gas station in Frostproof, Florida. Blip, blip, blip.
Yes, they are
Frostproof. What a funny name for a city.
In Florida.
In
of all
Florida.
places. So Michael was he had gotten out. They were stretching their legs. Michael went in, was heading into the store to get sodas and cigarettes, and he asked Abraham if he wanted anything. And Abraham pulled out his last $5 and asked Michael to get him 2 quick pick lottery tickets instead. And one of those tickets was winner, winner, chicken dinner.
Ooh.
This guy, Abraham, won $30 million.
Oh my God.
Jesus Christ.
He took a lump sum of 17, and after taxes, he claimed to have received about 11 million.
Oh, well, that's not bad either.
No, but
Fuck.
also that's just
It's all of
30 to 17, 17 to 11.
Well, did he cash out at 17?
He took the lump. So instead of getting payments, he took the lump sum of 17.
I would take those payments.
And then after that, the taxes. Now, see, let me tell you something. So
Taxes.
I think if I won I would not take the lump sum only so that I had less money. So people, like, if they were
Yes.
asking me for it, I'd be like, hey, man, I get this
Yes.
doled out. And we're going to talk about that because that is not what Abraham did. And
What are the two options? Taking a lump sum or having it paid out to you monthly?
Yeah,
they
like
they
payments.
or yearly, like
Yeah.
they dole it out slowly.
I would rather do that.
But you get less with one of them?
You get less if you take a lump sum and they pay you all at once. And then
Oh, I'd rather have
taxes-
more.
And taxes on top.
right, and taxes
like-
on top of the lump sum. Like if you spread it out over time, you're still going to pay a lot in taxes, but not as much because they're only going to be taxing you on what you're getting. But because he got this lump sum of 17, like 6 million of it just went to taxes.
Ew.
And
Which is
after that 6
shitty.
million to taxes, another 9,000 was taken off the top to pay the back child support that he owed.
Well, as he should.
Dang, that's
As he should.
not a lot.
Yeah.
I
was
mean,
expecting more.
$9,000
Oh, in the
coming off of
90s.
11 million isn't a lot, but $9,000 in back child support's kind of shitty.
That's
So,
true. I just
especially
heard
if you're the one
recent-
waiting on it.
One time I asked my mom in my teens, I was like, "Can I have that child support you get to like do stuff?" She's like, "No."
She's like, that's not what child support
that's
is for.
not what
I'm
it's
like,
for.
"God."
Back to Abraham. He did put $1 million in a trust for his son. He gave 1.7 million to his stepfather and stepsisters.
The
What
fuck
was
just happened?
that?
Itching my boob.
Oh.
And a giant hairball came
Oh, I
right at
hate
my
when that
ears.
happens.
Sorry.
A hairball from your boobs?
I
Is that a
think
common
just-
thing that happens to you?
We find
Well,
things in
there's
our boobs
hair
all
all
the
We do,
over
time.
yeah.
me.
Yeah, that's true.
We're just rolling in dogs.
Okay, so all right. So Abraham gave 1.75 million to his stepfather and stepsisters. So I think each of the stepsisters got like 250,000, and then he gave $1 million to his stepfather.
Wow.
However, he gave $12,000 to his mother and $10,000 to each of his sisters. Now, I don't know
Interesting.
what the
Right.
relationship or the dynamic was within his family, but I'm just like, that's really weird. Like you give 1.75 million to your step family, but
Step-
not
yeah.
Anyway, he paid over $130,000 paying off mortgages, one for a friend, one for a man whose last name he did not know, and one was a man from his neighborhood that he'd been knowing for a while.
He'd been what?
He'd been knowing for a while.
Was that a quote?
Yes.
I
He'd
love
been
that.
knowing for
He'd
a
been
while.
knowing
I've been
for a while.
knowing for a while.
He also bought a house like that he had seen once
Oh, no.
and then rented it to a couple he had only met once.
This
Isn't
is-
there like a show where it says the lottery or something ruined my life?
Yeah, I mean, the thing
I think
is,
I've seen
there's a very strong majority or a very large majority of people that win the lottery end up wishing that they had not, and usually end up like bankrupt.
Yeah.
So he was giving out money, just I mean, like
Left
left
and
and right.
right.
Like people just asked him for money, he was just giving it out. And he did treat himself, though.
Okay.
He bought himself a Ford F-150, a BMW, and a 6,519 square foot home that came with an enclosed pool, two
Yes.
two-car garages, and surveillance cameras built in. And this was in a gated community. He paid $1.1 million for that
Wow.
house. So I mean,
Dang,
just
you
doing the
took-
math in my head, he's
not
already down quite a
He's
bit on
running
that 11.
pretty low on, yeah.
So, but on top of all of that, and the constant people pounding him and begging for money or loans, not long after winning, that truck driver, Michael Ford, that he had been with, that went in and picked, got the tickets and brought him out, demanded a portion of the
I
winnings
was wondering about that.
but no less than 1 million. So he wanted a portion, but he wasn't going to take anything less than 1 million. And so Abraham refused. And Ford sued him, claiming that he bought the ticket and that Abraham had stolen the ticket from his wallet. So they go to court.
Oh my God.
And this is interesting. This is the thing. During the trial, Abraham comes in with a huge garbage bag stuffed with lottery tickets, supposedly from the last several years, showing I bought lottery tickets all the time. But I'm like, who is keeping, is that a thing to keep old non-winning lottery tickets? Who does that other than
A
maybe
hoarder.
hoarders?
I was gonna say hoarders.
But I don't think he was, I didn't see anything that made him look like he was a hoarder. Anyway,
That's
Um,
crazy.
So it was really weird. So, during the trial, he's asked, like, well, what about all this money you're giving away? And he's like, well, the Lord said it's better to give than receive. He also, during that trial, it came out that he had 3 women living with him in that home, and only one of them did he know their last name. And here's another quote. He said, I don't try to get to know nobody's last names. I don't know why, but this was Abraham.
Oh my God.
I don't try to know.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Nobody got time for that.
So in the end, the jury sided with Abraham. But then there was a lengthy appeals process because, of course,
Money,
Ford
and
wasn't going to take that.
Costs so much
And
money.
this came from the woman we're going to talk about later, but she had said something like he had spent like $850,000 on attorneys fighting this case. And so now he's got to go through a whole
Should've just given him the
appeals
money.
trial. Right? I mean,
he's giving away money. You might as well just.
yeah, I'm not sure why he was so adamant that he wasn't going to give this guy.
Yeah.
Like he's
Well,
giving
so-
money to people whose names he didn't know.
Yeah.
but-
I would assume that if he was asking me for that money and I gave it to him, he would just come back,
Back
and
and
ask
ask
for
for
more.
more.
That's
I mean,
very true.
it is possible.
So
By the time he had met with his appellate attorney, like Abraham's already been through the ringer, man. Like he's fighting this case, this lawsuit. People are still bugging him every day for money. He had gone on TV at some point and said, like, I just, there's a part of me that wishes I could go, like, I could walk the streets without people knowing who I am and always asking for money. His attorney, his appellate attorney, would not disclose how much of the winnings he had left, but he did say it was very sad.
Ugh.
And that first meeting that he and the Abraham and his appellate attorney had, the attorney said that like he walks into the room and there were like 10 people in there who he didn't know. He didn't know why they were there. He was like, were they friends? Were they advisors? Like hangers on? Like, and then he said, I'm not sure by whom, but I think he'd been taken advantage of. He was a man who was very weary by the time he got to me. I wonder if Abraham wouldn't say he would like to go back to the day before he won that money. And he had said very similar things to his friends and family. His last appeals hearing was scheduled for May 27th, 2009. He did not show up.
Oh no.
Abraham Shakespeare had disappeared.
Oh, Abraham.
The question was, did he disappear by choice because he was constantly being hounded, or had something happened? Finally, on November 9th of 2009, Abraham's family finally reported him missing. A friend of Shakespeare's, Eddie Dixon, said, only thing I know is that's my best friend. Y'all need to go ask that white woman where that man at.
Oh, girl.
White people, like we ruin everything.
Absolutely.
We really do. We just ruin everything.
Especially women.
Yes.
Like who are sneaky little snakes.
Yes. So that white
little snake.
Snake.
that white woman
That
was
white woman
that white
grabbed
woman
her cool whip and went over
Yes.
to
What?
white woman.
DeeDee Moore.
Hi, DeeDee.
DeeDee was a woman that Shakespeare had met about a year prior. She was introduced to him by his realtor, Barbara Jackson, the one that had sold him this $1.1 million house. So this whole scenario, like just how they met. Okay. It's just, this shit gets so weird and convoluted and like, okay. Barbara had been attending a conference where she met DeeDee, who rolled up alongside of her in a wheelchair. She had told Barbara that she'd been in a car accident. That's why she was in the wheelchair. Through course of discussion, Barbara had mentioned Abraham's story, and because she had said, like, he just changed her whole outlook on money. Like, it's not about the money. It's about helping people, because that apparently was genuinely really important to Abraham. All right. So DeeDee tells Barbara, hey, I'm a writer, and I would love to write a story, maybe even a book about this guy and his story. And so, Barbara gets really excited, and so she sets up, in October of 2008, she set up a meeting between the three of them. So Barbara says that when DeeDee arrives, she pulls up in a Hummer and hops out in heels. totally healed from her car accident.
I knew it.
She tells Barbara that she had healed herself with scuba therapy in less than 2 weeks.
Oh,
Like,
what?
it hadn't even been 2 weeks from the time they met. And she's like, oh, yeah, I healed myself with scuba
I don't
therapy.
think that exists.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I literally wrote, red flag much?
Yeah,
You know?
seriously.
Ted Bundy, that shit. Don't
right.
Don't.
That's what I immediately thought when you said she was in a wheelchair.
I
Yeah.
was like, this bitch ain't.
DeeDee claimed to be wealthy, and she was very charismatic. She appeared to Abraham in his life like someone that didn't need his money. Like, she said, you know, like, hey, I have my own money. Like, I don't need your money.
Yeah.
She was just there to help, and she kind of took on this role of like, well, I'm his financial advisor. But what nobody knew was that, like, back in 2001, good old DeeDee. So, and I'm telling this story not because it has any direct relation to this case, but I think it is a prime example of how this woman's mind works. So, back in 2001, she owned a $36,000 Lincoln Navigator, but she owed $46,000 on it.
Ooh, she was
And
upside down.
She's upside down in the car, and it was like on the verge of being repossessed. So, what is a girl gonna do? A girl's gonna get one of her friends to drive her out somewhere, tie her up, toss her in a ditch, and then go hide the car in a garage.
And say that she...
Then when somebody stops,
God.
like a good Samaritan stops to help her, she tells them that she's been carjacked and raped, held at gunpoint by
Oh my
3
God.
Hispanic men who then stole her car.
See, you make the mistake of adding all of these.
Like, it's way too much detail, bitch. Way too
Yeah.
much detail.
Oh my fucking God.
So, she even, like, they took her to the hospital. She even had them do a rape kit on her.
Which obviously came up that she hadn't
Yeah.
been
Correct.
raped. Do you have an answer to when they said, hey, you haven't been raped? Did she have anything to say?
It just, the only thing I know is that the outcome of this whole shenanigan was that she was convicted of insurance fraud and for falsely reporting a crime. She pled no contest. She got a year of probation.
Jesus Christ.
So this is just a taste of what you guys are in for. So buckle up,
Don't bring-
because this roller coaster just gets
Takes us
even
on
crazier. While the red flags should have been sirens for these people, DeeDee, she managed to just ingratiate herself completely into Abraham's life. Like, she was living in that house. And she offered to manage the remaining amount of his winnings. And, you know, she would say, well, he had lost so much or given so much of it away at this point that he was like, yeah, all right, you know,
Yeah, like, I
try
don't
something
give a
else.
fuck.
And after his disappearance, DeeDee claimed that Abraham had left of his own free will to get away from the endless requests for money, and that she had helped him do this. And there seemed to be evidence to support this. She provided police with a video she had taken of a conversation between the two of them where she asked him, like, hey, are you getting tired of people always asking you for money? And he's like standing there and he's like scrolling through his phone, and he was like, they just don't take no for an answer. You know, they just keep asking. So then she's like, well, where would you want to go? Like, California?
She's
Cozumel?
just like coaching and
And he's just like, I don't know, like, I'm not picky. And then she's like, well, would you miss your home? And he says something like, yeah, I mean, I might, but life goes on, or something like that. Like, you can just tell through the whole thing, like, he's annoyed with
done.
her. He doesn't really want her asking him these questions. You know, he's just kind of giving, like, whatever. But she just kind of keeps going. And finally, he just kind of gives her, like, this look, and then it ends. As the news of Abraham's disappearance began to circulate, DeeDee told 3 different newspapers that she could set up interviews with Abraham for them. She also had told his mother the same thing, but
Ew.
none of this ever actually happened. She had told one paper that he wanted to disappear because he was falling behind in child support again. He'd had another child with a much younger woman, and he didn't care what it was going to take to disappear. He wanted to be gone. In January of 2009, ownership of Abraham's home was transferred over to American Medical Professionals, which was a company owned by DeeDee. She also owned another company that money was put into called American Medical Associates. She took on over $570,000 of loans that Abraham had made that was owed back to him. So that was either transferred to her directly or to one of her companies. She claimed that Abraham had asked her to.
She's alarming. I'm sorry. Just saw a
She's
picture of her.
yeah, she's
I wanna
yeah.
see.
She looks dead in the eyes. It's just like a predator.
Oh,
in
yeah.
there. Holy God.
She kind of looks like Rodney O'Calla.
She does.
But when all of this happened, she
Ugh.
had like that
Mm.
ugly yellow blonde
Oh, yeah.
bleached hair, but
Like Lori Vallow hair.
yes, but even
Yeah.
more like
More sad.
brassy. So she claimed that Abraham had asked her to handle his collections for him because all he got was sob stories or threats from the people that he loaned money to. That's what she said.
Mhm.
But then, in February and March of 2009, DeeDee bought a car for her boyfriend, totaling more than $70,000.
Oh my God.
And she bought a $90,000 Hummer for herself.
Mhm.
The car for her boyfriend was paid with a cashier's check from her American Medical Professionals account. And she claimed that she only bought the new Hummer because Abraham liked to ride around in it.
How the fuck do you buy a 90,000 Hummer? Like, what are you doing
Well,
to this Hummer?
yeah, I mean, but again, in that time
Oh,
period,
that's
the
true. It was,
Hummers
like,
had
the first
just kind of
time.
come out, and people were like obsessed. So many people in Charleston had them,
forgot.
and I'm like, what are you people do? Like,
Oh my
this is
God.
literally called the Low Country. It's like you don't need a Hummer. There's no need for a Hummer in South
When
Carolina.
I saw Henry Rollins live, he went on a tangent about Hummers. He's like, you don't need one in LA. What's the point? But you need one here because there's just a mountain right there you got to get up.
Right.
It's
I mean, like,
yeah.
definitely.
Sorry if you have a Hummer. I'm sorry. I just don't. Ruin my thing. Have a good time with it.
They're terrible for the environment, and there's just no
They don't
need.
even make them anymore.
They don't?
Well, I don't know. She also established another company, Abraham Shakespeare LLC, for his investments. But she claims that this was really just an attempt by Abraham to hide his assets. In November of 2009, she said that it was a way to avoid taxes. Then in December of 2009, she changed that story and said, well, no, it was so that there would be nothing like liquid in the bank that could be used to be taken for child support. But in order for that to happen, he had to be removed from the account. So even though it was Abraham Shakespeare LLC, he wasn't a signer because that way then it wasn't his money and they couldn't take it for child support. But very
God.
shortly after his name was removed, $1 million was also removed from the account within like days of his name coming off. And DeeDee didn't really have a great explanation for that. She did try to change the subject and said, oh, well, he started a rumor that the IRS was after him so people would stop asking him for money, thinking that he didn't have any because he owed it to the IRS. And she's like, and in particular, he didn't want his, ex-girlfriend slash mother of his child to get any money. So she claimed that for all of this creative accounting she was doing for him, helping him to hide his assets, that she was going to get $250,000 off the top. And then the rest she would invest and dole out to him as he needed it. She claimed that she always gave him the money he requested in cash so there wouldn't be a paper trail to explain why there was no paper trail of the money that she had given him. Then she claimed, and so like I watched so many interrogation videos with her.
I saw some on the Googs.
Yeah, and so so one of her excuses was that after all this happened, then she started to feel really bad for what she was doing. She was really felt bad for his child's mother and felt guilty for helping him avoid child support. And she's like, this woman was almost homeless. So she said she offered to buy her a house and a car, just the bare necessities until the child support case went to trial. But really, this was just her explanation of why she had offered his ex-girlfriend a $200,000 house and car to say that she had seen and spoken to Abraham recently.
Yikes.
Yeah. So,
this is sad.
On December 27th of 2009, DeeDee Moore was eating out with Abraham's mother when let me start that over. My brain was like, did that say she was eating out Abraham's mother? That's where my head was. And so then I got distracted. Lost where it was. Okay, let me start that over. Blah, 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 blah. On December 27th, 2009, DeeDee was eating out with Abraham's mother when his mother got a call from someone pretending to be Abraham. Like, a mother does not know her own son's voice.
Right.
As it turns out, DeeDee had paid a friend of Abraham's that owed money to Abraham to call his mother and pretend to be him. But unbeknownst to DeeDee, this friend, his name was Greg Smith, he had been approached by investigators, and they gave him an offer to work with them, and he took it. Because at this point, police are just like, this whole situation is sketch.
Yeah.
So, in January of 2010, DeeDee reached out to Greg, and she was like, hey, man, do you know anybody that, like, might be willing to say that they killed Abraham for money? Not that they killed him for money, but would they confess in exchange for her paying them off to confess?
Got it.
So, on January 21st of 2010, Greg introduces DeeDee to a man named Mike Smith. He was presented to her as a guy who was headed to prison anyway, and he would be willing to take the rap for $50,000. But he did tell her, like, I got to know where the body is because they're not going to believe me if I can't tell them where the body is. The thing was, though, that Mike Smith was not a guy about to go to prison. Mike Smith was an undercover police officer.
I was like, this fucking name is too ridiculous.
Right.
However, when DeeDee meets with Greg Smith, she takes him out to one of her properties, shows him a concrete slab, and says, this is where Abraham is buried, and gives him a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson that she says was used to kill Abraham. And all of this was with police surveillance watching.
Wow.
Such an idiot. She's like a conniving, dumb, smart.
Yeah, it's insanity. And I listened to I did hear some recording of where she's like, why would you do this for me? To the undercover cop, and the undercover guy is like, well, I mean, I'm going to prison anyway, might as well make some money out of it, whatever. On January 27th, 2010, police start digging in the spot that DeeDee herself had led them to, and they find a body. 2 days later, it is confirmed that it is indeed Abraham's body. He'd been shot twice with a .38, and the coroner placed the time of death to some point in early April 2009. They actually believe that it was, I think, April 6th, 2009. As I said, the body was found on her property. It was about 9 feet down, so it wasn't even a shallow grave. She dug.
Yeah. Damn, dude.
Well, on the cement, didn't she?
Yeah, and it was.
Jesus.
And the body was found in the clothing that he was last seen wearing in that video where DeeDee's asking him.
She's just.
And it's I think she thought that was gonna be her safety net. See, he wanted to leave, when really all it did was make her look way more guilty.
Yeah.
With his clothing, all of the metal had been removed. So literally cut out the zippers, buttons, anything.
Metal detectors? Jesus Christ.
Yeah. To avoid being
Oh,
detected.
wow.
Right?
Wild
And
bitch.
the digger that was used to make the hole was found in storage nearby. His blood was found on her carpet.
Oh my fuck.
So they had bought this paintball
Oh, yeah, the
because
paintball.
that was going to be a business and part of where they're funneling money into. But also her husband, that was his job, was her ex-husband.
Oh.
And she had divorced him right around the time that she met Abraham. But they had a 15-year-old son together.
Oh, that poor kid.
Right. So between the time that they found the body and it was identified, DeeDee's ex-husband, who we were just talking about, is questioned by authority. And he tells them that sometime in the first 2 weeks of April, DeeDee had called him to dig a hole in her yard. He said he'd been paid to do other work for her, so he came over and he dug the hole. He stated about 2 hours after he had finished, DeeDee called him and said, hey, I need you to come back and fill the hole, which he did.
Weird.
But when he went back, it was dark. And so he just filled the hole.
Right.
He didn't know what was in it. And I think one of I didn't read it anywhere, but in one of the interrogations, the officers are like, why were you so sweaty when he showed back up to fill in the hole? Like, sweaty like you'd been working. She's like, well, I was just crying so much. And they were like, yeah,
Crying doesn't
make you sweaty. And she's like, well, it
No.
does for me.
Oh my
God.
Get
She's like, I have a doctor's note.
Yeah, I mean,
this
seriously.
bitch out of here.
Oh my God. So, like I said, I watched all of these interrogations with her, and like, I got to give it to these investigators because,
They held it
I
together.
mean, there are a few times that they do kind of lose it and kind of yell at her a little bit, but
yeah.
they really do. I mean, it is insane and fascinating and awful to watch her because like she'll start telling a story and she like really goes down these like super intricate rabbit holes that like you're like, wait a minute, like what are you like, wait, what are we even talking about here? You know, so she
To
tries to
distract.
distract that way. But yeah, so she's telling like the most convoluted stories. They don't make sense. And I started like trying to write down like all of the different stories
Oh
she
my
told, and then I
God.
was just like,
No
this
wonder
is
you
we'll
were
be
like,
here,
This is too
we'll be here
much.
forever if I do that. And they're just so convoluted and they don't make sense. And
You
I'm
can
just like,
watch the video.
yeah, we
if
like
you
that's what I was
wanna
gonna
see.
say.
Yeah.
We'll link the interrogation videos. You can watch them. They're really hard to get through. She's so obnoxious. She turns the tears on and off. I mean, she's like 1 minute she's just like, I'm so scared for my life, and then the next minute she's talking to them like this.
Mm-mm.
I mean, it's
It's Jody
it's
Arias,
fascinating,
like,
but
times.
this is when I
I keep
texted
thinking of
you.
Diane
50.
Downs.
Yeah, that
all
too.
of it,
Very,
yeah.
very similar.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. Like this is the one where I was texting you last night, and I'm like, you know how like annoying that chick is in Squid Game? I
Yes.
was just like, that's what this chick reminds me of.
Yeah,
It's just
dude.
super.
That chick was the fucking worst.
She really
Don't say
was.
it.
I know.
I'm not.
You're gonna have to
You'll
watch
just
it.
know when you see
I
her.
already
You'll
know
know
from
who
the
it
first
is.
episode who you're talking about.
Yeah, because she's the one that smuggles in her cigarettes. But so the other thing that was really fascinating to watch is she kept trying to pin the murder. Like she would tailor her story to like try to implicate certain people, but then as she would, and she'd get called like bullshit would get
Yeah.
called on her, then she'd be like, no, that's not what I was saying. And
She just dig herself
I mean,
into more of a
she
hole.
tried to blame everybody but herself. She tried to blame at first on the undercover cop before she knew that he was undercover.
Oh my god.
Then she tried to blame it on his cousin. And I was watching that episode where they were just like, the guy was just like, we know that it's not him, so just stop. Like, you know, she's like, no, I wasn't trying to say it was him, but she totally was. She claimed that it was one of his lawyers who like she tells this whole long story about how this lawyer had a crack problem, and Abraham had a picture of him with a crack pipe, and he was using that as blackmail against this attorney, and this attorney really felt like he was taking advantage of him. Like this whole thing, I mean,
So
is
much
bizarre.
fun.
I mean, and these are like, again, really super detailed and yet completely convoluted, make no sense stories. And so finally the cops are just like, listen, lady, listen, like you're going to jail. Right now what we need to establish is, are you and your ex-husband going to jail, leaving your son with no parents, or just you going to jail, essentially? Because her poor ex-husband unwittingly
Well, yeah, he has no idea.
participated in the cover-up and, you know, dug the grave, filled in the grave, didn't know it. So finally, during one of the interviews, she finally admits to being a witness to Abraham being shot and knowing where he was buried. So on February 2nd, 2010, she was taken into custody and charged as an accessory after the fact. Her bond was set at $1 million. She has this insane story about this was a drug deal gone bad. There's this fictitious drug dealer named Ronald, and that's what happened. So then they're like, okay, well, if it was this drug dealer named Ronald, why was Abraham shot with a gun that you bought and purchased and was in your possession?
Mm-hmm.
So then she's like, oh, well, that's because, I mean, this bitch is just she's a
Just
pathological
one by
liar.
one.
And she can just go, I mean, honestly, like, in the moment, they said, like, when they would interview her, that she would kind of like drift off, like her eyes would like go off and you could see the wheels turning and then she would just have another.
Ew.
So she says, oh, well, no, like, so what happened was all of these guns, including mine, were in a safe, and the safe was open. And then Abraham pulled a gun on Ronald,
Oh my
and Ronald
God.
was able to reach into my safe and pull out my gun and shoot him. Yeah, right. I have never, like, we all talk about our different stories and like when we want to be done with them and like just being so over it. Like, I
Yeah.
was just so over her.
Yeah, dude.
Like, I feel
She's-
so bad for Abraham, but this woman is just
She's gonna drive me to drink
something else.
a Mojo
Yes.
Sody.
Yes. Well, that you've got the sparkling
Sparkling
there.
water.
Oh, yes, I was sparkling water.
Liver
What do you think?
shrinking.
Take it. We'll pause for a minute.
Liver shrinking friendly.
for an ad, not ad.
Mm.
Mm.
So she claimed that, like, oh, this whole thing. Oh my god. So she claimed that after they shot Abraham, that he was wearing a dark coat and he like got right up. So she was like, I didn't know that he was like mortally wounded. Like, there was no blood because he was wearing a dark thing and he stood up. And then she was like that they had taken her into another room. And then she finally went to sleep. And when she got up the next morning, she went and she was like, I just went about my business. And then I went back. And so they're like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay. So these two drug dealers just shot somebody, but they're going to leave you, a witness,
Of course.
alive?
Right.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, but they needed me because I could still get them money out of the bank. And they're like, okay. They're like, well, why didn't you call the police? She's like, well, I was scared. They're like, but you weren't there. Like,
Yeah.
you left. And she's like, well, they were threatening my son. They're like, yeah, but you left. Like,
Mhm.
they don't have you or your son. Like, why
Right.
didn't you just call the police and say, hey, go to this
Yeah.
house. There's 2 drug dealers and a dead body. And then she puts on this performance where she's like, they put a gun in my mouth. I peed myself. I peed myself. And these 2 cops are just like,
literally.
I mean,
I'd be
I
so
like,
exhausted.
insert eye roll here. I mean, it was, I mean, it was
Jesus.
seriously one of the wildest things I've ever watched.
Oh.
I peed.
Oh my god.
I mean, like, that's not to say, like, honestly, like, I get it. And the problem is that you've made this whole story up and
Yeah.
nobody believes a fucking thing you say.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I just was wailing. Anyway, so
Ugh.
at trial, so this goes to trial, and it was like a month after that she had been charged with the, sorry, I think I missed saying this, after she was charged with basically an accessory after the fact. After all of this questioning, they bumped this up to first
Yeah.
degree murder.
Yeah.
So she goes to trial, and at trial, she declined to take the stand, and the defense rested without calling even a single witness.
Wow.
Wow.
And the defense, I don't know, her lawyer, I read something, it didn't make any sense to me, which is why I didn't include it in the story, but it was something like nobody saw her do it. Like, there's no, like, who are we going to call? There's nobody that can prove a negative that she didn't, she wasn't involved.
Right.
Oh my
And
God.
there's
Part of the
nobody, there's no
strategy-
witnesses to say that
strategy.
she was involved, so there's nobody for us to call.
I hate them.
She broke down several times during the trial, and the judge repeatedly had to scold her, and it was hysterical because I watched a couple of clips from like news reports from Florida where they were like, the guy's just like, yeah, this is like the 4th or 5th time she's broken down. I mean, even the newscasters were just
God.
like, nobody's buying this woman.
So over
No,
it.
yeah, everybody was. And then one time, as the jury was like exiting the courtroom, she's like screams out, I'm so sick of all of these people lying. And the judge was like, no,
Oh my.
not allowed to do, she's sitting in
Yeah.
the chair like, "Ugh." And he's just like, no, you need to shut that down.
Get the fuck out.
So she was once again reprimanded by the judge. A former inmate friend of hers had to be thrown out of the courtroom by the judge for allegedly threatening witnesses.
Oh my god.
What is happening?
And like the jury, again, I didn't include this, but I think the jury had to be escorted in and out of the courthouse because Abraham's family and friends were like all outside and making them feel uncomfortable. So I don't know what, like, This trial was just a shit show. So, as I said, during the trial, it came out that she had offered that house and car to Abraham's ex to say that she'd seen him. She also testified that DeeDee had told her that Abraham had, quote, run off with that lady from the bank.
Oh,
Um,
Thai lady from the bank.
Abraham's mother stated that DeeDee had told her that Abraham wasn't missing, but had AIDS. And like she had told other people, like, oh, he has AIDS. He's getting treatment in the Caribbean. Like, I mean, just
Ew.
whatever she had to tell people to like appease them. She had given somebody money at one point to like give to his mother. She also gave somebody like $5,000 to give to his son, like supposedly from him. And then, like, they were getting calls and texts and things from his phone. But this is a guy who's basically illiterate. Like, he can't write. And they're getting these full text messages like, hey, I'm all right. I'm cool. I just don't want to be. And they're like, this is not. She also, I love this. So she had both phones. She had hit her phone and Abraham's phone, right? But she thought she was so smart. She's like, no, you can see he called or he texted me on this day. You can check the phone records, which they did. They also checked the cell phone towers and found that they pinged on the exact same tower, meaning that the phones were together.
Yep.
Oh, this woman. So finally, I think this also kind of final nail in the coffin. The jury got to see surveillance video from Walmart showing DeeDee spending $104 on gloves, duct tape, plastic sheeting,
Oh my God.
and other items that were found either on or near Abraham's body. On December 10th of 2012, after deliberating for more than 3 hours, the jury came back with a verdict.
Wow, that was a long time.
Guilty.
Okay.
The prosecution had not, they did not seek the death penalty, so her sentence came back as life in prison without parole. She was also sentenced to an additional 25 years for possession of a firearm used in a felony. The judge said, "You're probably the most manipulative person this court has ever seen.
I just got goosebumps. Oh my God.
Jesus.
Abraham Shakespeare was your prey and your victim. Money was the root of evil that you brought to Abraham. You are sentenced to life in prison and you shall not be eligible for parole."
Ah.
Dude, me as a judge, I could not. They'd be like, you need to get the fuck out of here. Because I'd be like, unacceptable behavior. I would like every single fucking person I'd send away. I'd be like, this is going to be.
Person
I'm
away.
like, listen. Send him away.
So,
Listen.
Bring me the head of a pig.
So DeeDee's given a few interviews in her post-conviction life, and her story continues
to change.
to change. So the best part was she did this interview with like this ABC correspondent, and he's visiting her in prison or whatever, and she's like got this this lap of documents. And she's like, you see, all of these are like witness statements. Like they didn't get entered. My attorneys didn't enter them. They had these been entered, like I would not be here. And he was like, but you wrote those. And she's like, what? And he's like, I mean, looking at these, like that looks like your handwriting. It appears like you wrote these letters. She gets all in a snit and gets up and leaves. And she's like, as she's leaving, she's like, I'm going to give you, because he was like, all right, well, if you didn't do it, then who did? She's like, I'm going to give you a name. She's like, Deanna. And then she just leaves. But there's like nothing else. Like just shouts this random name. She was also in an episode of Women Who Kill for Channel 4 in the UK. And at that point, she said that she didn't know who killed Abraham and that she wasn't present for it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, in 2019, DeeDee wrote a letter to the judge in an attempt to get a new trial. And while she apologized for not being initially truthful,
Oh my God.
even though she's literally never been truthful, she made sure not to accept any responsibility. And she once again tried to throw suspicion on another person. This time, it was Greg Smith. So the one that was friends with Abraham that, was working with the police to help bring her down. She claimed in this letter that he had killed Abraham because Abraham was having an affair with his wife. And then I wrote, insert eye roll here. She claimed in the letter that she had witnesses to this, but her attorneys didn't call them, and that's why she should be granted a new trial. So as of 2019, she had, I think, had an existing appeal. It had not been decided upon. As for a new trial, I didn't see that the judge ever responded to
Probably
that.
not.
So she's still currently sitting in jail in Florida. Hopefully, I'm
rotting.
trying.
Yeah, I wonder how she's treated there with her fucking games. In the jail,
yeah, I mean,
or
she's
prison.
I just don't think I've ever seen someone be able to, I mean, like, literally the lies just fly out of her mouth so fast. Like, it's seconds where she's like, oh fuck, that doesn't work, or they don't believe
Yeah.
that. And so she's
got a whole like story written in her
Yeah.
brain. You know the
And
you know the books where you can like
choose your own adventure book. Yeah.
books. That's what it reminds me of.
Yes. So that was the sad and tragic story of Abraham Shakespeare, who won the lottery
Poor
and died the
Shakespeare.
next day. He didn't die the next day, but
But
Pretty much.
I
he won
mean,
the lottery, died the next day. Isn't it ironic?
Alanis Morisette,
Don't you
that's all I
think?
know. Don't you think?
It's a little too ironic. Yes,
Don't
I
you
really
think?
do think.
It's like
on
rain.
a recording day.
God. Okay. Well, we've
Yeah, so that's
recorded
it.
3 stories. It's been a long fucking day.
We're gonna wrap it up.
Yay.
Wrap it up.
I
Thank
mean,
you
by
for
the time
listening.
this episode airs, your surgery will be done.
Yeah.
And
And you have probably been through recovery and will be getting close to
Yeah.
Christmas or
So
Yeah.
something.
My surgery's in 5 days.
that is
Woo.
crazy. So
5 days.
It's so weird to listen back, because it's like going back in time.
I know,
But
it's
in the
weird.
future,
it's weird.
back
Oh
then,
my god.
space-time
that was-
continuum, wibbly wobbly, timey
Oh
wimey.
my god.
Okay.
Time is a circle.
Bye.
Remember who you are and what you represent.
And
Yay.
don't
Steal people's winnings and don't murder them.
And if they win the lottery, help them go hide. Go hide with the
Oh,
Amish.
and that was I guess I probably should have mentioned this. Police's theory where it was that he kind of confronted her about not being able to get his money when he wanted it and was kind of maybe trying to take it back, and she was like, I don't want to lose this money. Bow.
Sounds right.
Yeah. So
That-
all right, my poor
Goldie's
dog.
telling us it's
Yep,
time
it's
to go.
due.
It's dinner
Yep.
time.
All
Okay.
right, bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. We put out new episodes every single Wednesday, and if you're impatient like me, be sure to become a Patreon where you can get your episodes early each week. For as little as $2 a month, you not only significantly support the production of this podcast, but you'll also get extra benefits and perks for being one of our special Patreon weirdlings. Go to patreon.com/threesacrime for more information. For all of our links related to our socials, affiliate codes, where to listen, and everything else, go to linktree/threesacrime.